Welcome to the Black Catalyst Show, where we spotlight Black queer folks inspiring change in their own way. In each episode, I'm going to introduce you to a rising Black icon in the queer community who is charting a new path in their respective field. You'll also hear news that affects our community most, a mini history lesson on all things LGBTQ+, and on the street hot takes. My goal each episode is to inspire you with Black queer goodness that will silence every doubt and imposter syndrome you've ever experienced. I truly believe in be the change you want to see. But how do you see it if you don't know where to find it? Y'all, it's overdue. And this is the Black Catalyst Show. I'm your host, Jameela Hammond. Growing up Haitian American, I deeply suppressed my long-awaited queerness for a long, long time. I knew for sure by high school, but it wasn't until well after college that I felt comfortable in my own skin. And bold Black queer representation was hard to find. Y'all, we only have one life to live, and George Floyd's death united people to stand for racial justice and LGBTQ+ rights. We saw protests throughout the world. Black Lives Matter. All Black Lives Matter. Black LGBTQ leaders have been at the forefront of change in the contemporary Black Lives Matter movement. The catalysts that inspire include Alicia Garza and D. Ray McKesson. It's building on historic movements like gay liberation. Queer people of color and trans activists Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera in 1969 that turned into the Stonewall riots. Gay and women's liberation movements started alongside civil rights campaigns where Bayard Rustin, a Black gay civil rights activist and mastermind of events like March on Washington. Rustin was also an advisor to Martin Luther King Jr. in the 1950s and 60s. BIPOC LGBTQ+ versus white LGBTQ+ are very different in representation and experiences, as represented in the documentary The Same Difference. The battle for more Black queer representation has gone as far as the Emmys. As the first Black woman to win an Emmy for comedy writing, Lena Waithe has been instrumental in pushing Hollywood for more Black queer representation. These are just some of the Black changemakers leading the way in their inspiring journey as Black catalysts. Each episode, I want to connect you with Black queer folks living boldly in their truth as they inspire us. Today, we're taking it to Chicago. We get to know Black queer-owned bar Nobody's Darling and the OGs of Black queer pop-up events and bars from the 1970s, who are also in the Chicago Hall of Fame, by the way. McCombs and Vera Washington are going to be joining us. Super, super excited. But first, these news headlines. It's time for JAMMIN News, where we spotlight what is going on with our very large family. The crisis between Russia and Ukraine has also exposed their treatment of marginalized refugees. According to them, Black Ukrainians have faced racism and xenophobia at the borders from Ukrainian Border Patrol, who are pushing Ukrainian-first policies. On the other end of the spectrum, LGBTQ+ Ukrainians are in fear of Russia's homophobia, including its ban on gay marriage and anti-LGBTQ+ law. Clubhouse confronts everything associated with Texas, including its most progressive event, South by Southwest. Clubhouse announced they won't be at South by Southwest because of the state's attempt to limit gender-affirming care for trans youths. In lieu of their participating in person, they'll hold its panel The Power of Voice on its platform. Clubhouse will also donate the travel costs associated with the conference, instead to local organizations, while holding a series of Clubhouse rooms that are dedicated to supporting trans speakers and creators. Ooh, and Brian Michael Smith is the first trans man to be named one of People magazine's Sexiest Men Alive. Smith stars as a firefighter alongside Rob Lowe in 911 Lone Star on Fox. He shares the importance of Black trans representation as a hero on network television.
I've never seen a trans hero in this way, you know? So like to have a trans person like in this role as a hero, shown as a hero, and it's not about his struggle with his identity. It's just part of the fabric of who he is. And like, it's actually an asset to his character as opposed to something to overcome.
Google launched an online glossary, but forgot to include bisexual. According to LGBTQ Nation, Google made sure to include demisexual and anti-LGBTQ slurs, but left out bisexuals and pansexuals. Fun fact, apparently on Google, I would be black queer, which is what Google listed for black queer folks. Y'all, and Lena Waithe has signed a multi-year deal with Warner Brothers Television Group that will include her production company, Hillman Grad Productions, and her business partner, Rishi Rajani. That's so cool. They'll be producing new television programming for all platforms, including Warner Media's HBO Max, external streaming services, cable, and 5 broadcast networks. Their first project will be a scripted drama inspired by the 1994 landmark documentary, Hoop Dreams. Here's a bit of that documentary trailer.
Comes a journey of heartbreak and hope, from city streets to the brink of fame.
Isaiah Thomas.
The amazing story of 2 boys and 2 families struggling against the odds.
My mother, God bless her, she's always said to me, this America, you can make something of your life.
Against the system.
You have to realize you can make their team win.
To make a dream come true.
Chicago-born Lena Waithe, as we know, is no stranger to sharing stories from her hometown. As the creator of Showtime's drama series The Chi, but Hoop Dreams was extra special for her growing up. Here's what she told Deadline about watching the documentary as a young person. I was seeing 2 young Black people with dreams bigger than their backyard and watching their journeys as they also struggled and tried to understand where they fit in their families. I always knew I wanted to bring that story back because Hoop Dreams, to me, is so representative of what it means to have a dream, to be from a city that you really believe in and you're really proud to be from. Y'all, you've heard about the historical changemakers from Marsha P. Johnson to Angela Davis, but you haven't heard about our very, very special guests who happen to be in the Chicago LGBT Hall of Fame. In the early 1970s, they created a social alternative to bars, creating the Aquarius Air Connection, for y'all Aquariuses out there, a home party that evolved into producing large parties on the South Side throughout the year. In 1982, they created Executive Suite, which began as a lesbian-only travel club, which is what we know now as a bar takeover or a pop-up bar. They are so critical and instrumental to lesbian bar history, especially in Chicago. And they fought racist carding in the 70s. Folks, without further ado, I bring to y'all Pat McCombs and Vera Washington. Woo! Wow, thank you so much, y'all, for being here. This is beyond, I'm over the moon right now.
So glad to be here.
Ditto that.
And to kind of even take it one step further, y'all are critical to lesbian history, to lesbian bar history, all of it, not just in Chicago. So I just want to like give y'all those flowers. You know, for folks and for me, I'm so curious because y'all are so instrumental to lesbian history. When you both created Executive Suite, Pat, you weren't out yet. And Vera, were you out at the time?
Yes, I was out.
I've always been out.
She's been out since birth.
You see, because Executive Suite was a women of color organization, we had to be kind of careful how we presented it. So when we say well, it wasn't out, I wasn't saying this is a lesbian party. We just said a party for women, Executive Suite. But on our pluggers or our announcements that we passed out in order for people to know about it, it was never anything related to any lesbian. We might have had a female symbol with the Executive Suite, but we never said lesbian on the pluggers because people of color did not accept that, in society during that time. So we had to be undercover lesbians.
Well, I thought it was interesting because what I consider coming out is because by the time Executive Suite was kind of what you guys were, when y'all started Executive Suite, folks at your job didn't know, right? Like you're a teacher, you're in education.
No. I taught school for the Board of Education. Hell no. No.
It was later on that her school knew she was a lesbian.
As I got more popular and more of the parents I found out of my students were lesbians coming to my parties, of course they found out.
That's how she came out in the end.
Wow. And so first, I'm curious as to like how y'all's actual experiences were coming out, like, and by coming out that it's out there in the open to your coworkers by this point. Like, how was that coming out experience?
Well, I was outed when I was working. There was someone that knew me, and I guess they just took it upon themselves to tell other people, other co-workers of mine, and it was what it was. They asked me, do you like women? I said, don't you like them? And left it like that. I think women are gorgeous. So yes, I like women. But I was outed on my job.
Well, I never let my job know anything. If they heard about it, they never said anything to me. But one of my students, when I received the Hall of Fame award, they videotaped it on PBS. And during Gay Pride weekend, they recorded it.
Right. And that's the thing during Pride Week. They do that because my father's one of his friends said, I saw your daughter on TV. One of my daughter's friends that I know, they said, congratulations on your award. I saw it on TV. So we see those things during Gay Pride weekend.
Oh my gosh. And it seems like that was more often than not the case, that folks were out because they were outed. And it kind of brings up the point of like creating safe space. For folks that are listening, what are some of the complexities within the LGBTQ plus families with inclusive spaces and exclusionary spaces?
I can only speak for when we're talking about Executive Suite or the things that we did, we mainly were a social organization focusing on safe spaces for women of color in the city of Chicago. My concern was mainly to have a safe space where women felt comfortable to socialize, party, network, and do different things under this beautiful umbrella of Executive Suite, hidden lesbian organization. So we had to carry ourselves a certain kind of way in order to be more presentable to a wider range of women, because, there are different levels of us within our own community. So that's mainly what we focus on, and that's why we chose certain places to have social events. They were like really nice high-end clubs so that we could attract a certain quality of women who were hidden because of their sexuality, but yet proud to socialize and be around other women.
And there were times when, we all used to take photographs. Some of them didn't like to be photographed because for those purposes. So if it was going to be out to the public or someone else, not necessarily to the public or share with someone else, if they before I would take a picture, it had to be okay.
Yeah, we would ask.
Yeah, we would ask that.
Because everybody coming to the party wasn't out.
I mean, it's better today than it was in the 80s and 90s. You know, people now, since 2000, let's just say, they're more open, because if you're out in the public and you're in a gay surrounding, somebody, whether it's the news or somebody's going to take your picture. They're okay with it. But back then, they would run from the cameras.
But in terms of the family and the dynamics, I didn't like to deal with that, because a lot of times we were not accepted by our family. They didn't even know about us. So our main focus was on the socialization, a place where you can feel free, comfortable, and meet others of like mind.
Right.
And so that was our main focus, and to make them feel comfortable enough, and a variety of activities we did in order to just have a bigger scale rather than an actual party. We would have workshops. We had vendors at our events, that lesbian vendors that sold different items or did certain things. We would have announcements of other organizations so that women were aware of what else was out there in order for them to get certain services that they might need. So we were just all over the place trying to make sure that it was very conducive, as yet rewarding for women of color in the Chicago area. And we wanted them to feel proud to come to our parties.
And one thing, we were more personable. Back then, when everybody was passing out flyers, we gave...
No internet.
We gave them a plug because we wanted to let them know who Executive Suite was. So we didn't put flyers on people's cars like they did back then. We didn't do none of that. You knew who we were. So when you were coming to the party, our faces are there for you to come in. You'll see coming in.
To greet you at the door. We walk around the party. We greet people at the door. It's a more personal approach, because I felt like I was so happy you were willing to come to the space.
Right.
I wanted you to feel special. So that was our main thing. We want you to feel special. We'd have candy on the doors. We do all kind of contests. We had all kind of raffles.
At that time, back then, we also have food. So you got to get a good meal while you're drinking and having fun. There was a lot of things that we did within our parties.
For folks that still haven't understood the deeper understanding and why Executive Suite was created, it was really a response also. It was a call to action. It was a response in creating community formation. And it stemmed from the racist carding that was going on. So that people can get a deeper understanding, what was your first experience?
Well, it happened when I started, because I've always been a militant lesbian, let me say that. And I lived on the north side of Chicago, which was mostly white at the time. And I have always been really active in lesbian groups and stuff like that. I usually was the token black in the group. So I've had experience with it throughout different times. Anyway, this particular incident happened at August and CK's. I was not there, but I was over a friend's house, and I'm going to tell you how stuff just started. We're sitting around partaking in herbal delights. And I don't know if you know what that is, but it is what it is. And we were sitting around, and some girl came, one of our friends came. They were so upset because they had been rejected at the door at August and CK's at the time, a bar. They said they couldn't come in at that because the woman had asked one of them. It was a group of them that got there. Two of them could go in, but two of them couldn't. So when you have friends that come together, what happened? You all leave. So they said, well, do you have a green card? And at the time, a green card was a public aid identification card. But if you're on public aid and you need assistance, they'd give you a green card for ID during that time in Chicago. That's what they call it. I don't know where else they did it because I never had public aid, so I don't know. But I said, I am just outdone. I said, we need to do something about this. So we started an organization. That night, we thought of a name. It sound good. Black Lesbian Discrimination Investigative Committee. It sound real good to us. Started that organization that night high as a kite. Then we said, well, look, let's picket the bar. So I had a lot of white girlfriends, and I told them what happened. I had this lawyer I knew that I had messed around with for a second. I told her about it, so she was in the line with us. I never forget, Renee Hanover was her name. And she told us what to do. I got some more of my sisters, soul sisters, make signs, and my white sisters, allies, they were there. And we picketed that bar, and they hated it because a lot of people would come from the suburbs to drive to the north side. And when they saw us picketing, they had to go back because they wasn't crossing that picket line. And then I took them to Human Relations and did a lot of other stuff with the bar in order to put up a sign to specify what ID was acceptable at the door. And so our organization put out that we would be investigating other bars to put claims in for discrimination if that's what we found out. Of course, I didn't do that. I just kept at that one bar because I wasn't concerned about the other bars because I wasn't trying to go into other bars. But we put the fear of them. We put the fear of them in that the Black Lesbian Discrimination Investigative Committee was available to oversee discrimination in the gay clubs of North Chicago.
North Side Chicago. I still have that article.
I wrote an article in the paper, in Gay Life paper. But anyway, under a different name, Pat Love. I didn't use my real name at the time because I was in the closet. And then I heard about Pam Terrell and Sharon Webb, two women that were giving parties on the South Side. They were called Executive Suite. They called me up and asked me, Pat, would you like to be a part of Executive Suite? I wasn't doing nothing at the time. I had just broke up with a different organization I was in. So I said, I'm not doing nothing. They said, well, the parties are for all women. We gonna have this party. I say, okay. So that's how I got involved with Executive Suite. Pam Terrell had to move out the city to take care of some family stuff. Sharon Webb had some personal problems with situations. And so she wasn't available. So I was by myself. Vera was Pam Terrell's ex-woman. And when Pam moved out, well, they had broken up. But she was always around. So I said to Vera, I think I'm going to give a party, but I'm going to pick 10 people. I picked 10 people to sell 10 tickets or more. Worked it out where they got half of the money for the tickets. Vera sold so many damn tickets, I say, well, let's be partners. So we continued the Executive Suite platform after Sharon and Pam had left. So it initially started with Sharon Webb and Pam Terrell. So that's how it initially started. But it started mainly, my passion was because I felt black women of color, not just black women, because I had the Latin community too, and white women. I just wanted to be a place where we could feel happy or comfortable, or we could dress up and we could really just show ourselves off. So that's what we went for, venues that catered to a very classy lifestyle, I should say.
Vera, what was your first experience being race carded?
Like Trisha said, Pam Terrell was my lover. She and I went to Augie and CK's, and they wouldn't let Pam in, but they'll let me in. And that's where I felt the first discrimination. How you not gonna let her in? She got a military ID. She has an ID, but they said the military ID was invalid. But her face is not invalid. She is still the same person. So I got on board with that. And then other discriminations with housing that they were picketing with Renauda Gray. Yes, you know, at her condo, we picket that. So discrimination was running rapid back then.
And still is.
What did it mean for each of you to see so many people come out to your parties who also hadn't come out yet?
Sometimes during the party, or as you're standing at the door welcoming all these women in, to me, it was a feeling of euphoria. It was a feeling of exhilaration, because it's like, oh, we're here, we're queer, and I'm happy to see you. You know, it's just that you felt so good to have some place to actually be you, to be yourself. You're so hidden on your job, in your homes, everywhere you go.
And the women that came was really love being in a safe space and women loving on women. Even today, there are women that came to are still together 40 years later, has met at our parties. Still together, got their homes and their children and their grandchildren. They built it from coming to an executive suite party. This is the funniest thing, we had a boat ride. Girl came to the boat ride with her boyfriend and left with a girl.
We've had that. Most of our parties, we tried to have female security, female barmaids, female everything, female DJs if we could. Of course, we ended up, but I'm just saying, for the most part, it was centered around female energy. That's what we strive for.
Right.
Like, what are some of y'all's most memorable experiences in putting some parties like that together?
A midnight to 5 in the morning boat cruise.
We took trips.
We had trips, like we would rent a Greyhound bus and go to other gay events in other cities. We just did a lot of.
We went to New York for the 25th of Stonewall. We had a whole plane full of people there.
Thank you so much, Pat McCombs and Vera Washington, for joining us today. This means the world, and thank you so much for all of your service, and y'all are so incredible. Thank you so much. So while I was out in the blistering cold of Chicago, my California sensitivities were not prepared for the wind chill and what cold really actually means. But I couldn't help but get a pulse for what is on the minds of Chicago folks. And it went a little something like this. Hit it. We are here in the frigid cold of Chicago.
Yeah, cold.
If you could be a drink, what drink would you be?
I'm a bourbon whiskey girl, so I had me some whiskey with some Coke, and I like a sweet edge, so vanilla.
The mezcal old fashioned. That was going to be the best drink for me, and it has it served me probably a little too well, possibly. Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like it'd be a Boulevardier, sweet vermouth. So it's like I can be sweet. I feel like the bourbon as a base, it's just like a warm hug, and then a little bit of bitter on there, just because it's like, we live in reality, and you can sip it. You don't have to chug it. You just sip it and relax, and it's good.
What stereotype in the community do you think that you are guilty of?
Oh, you know what? I don't think I'm as much guilty as, I'm pretty open, but our community as a whole, masculine presenting women are so multifaceted. I had a child as a masculine presenting lesbian woman, and
I would say not like speaking to everybody, you know what I'm saying? Because up here in Chicago, like, you can speak to people and people won't speak back, you know what I'm saying? Like, I do like to speak to everybody, and I think that's a downfall of being, you know what I'm saying, in a gay community. I wish we could just all love each other for who we are.
What experience best describes you?
Library be my spot, where I could chill, relax, sit around some water.
I like cafe book nooks.
And what's one thing you want people to know about Chicago?
Oh man, the food. Shit, the food is good. You know what I'm saying? Healthy.
Now, from the south side of Chicago, we move to Andersonville. Nobody's darling, to be exact. The pandemic added to the already declining number of lesbian bars. In 1980, there were 200 lesbian bars in the United States. Now there are about 21. The last lesbian bar in Los Angeles County, the Oxwood Inn, closed its doors in 2017. Of the lesbian bars left, there are only 2 that are Black-owned. Hers in Mobile, Alabama. The other is in Chicago. Nobody's Darling takes its inspiration from the Alice Walker poem, Be Nobody's Darling, to heart. But it's better known as the Queer Cheers. They've created an inclusive, safe space for all. I went to Chicago to speak with the bar owners, Renauda, Riddle, and Angela Barnes. I wanted to discover what makes Nobody's Darling such a unique experience. Nestled in the predominantly white neighborhood, if you walk further down the intimate street of Baltimore Avenue, the spirit of a speakeasy. Brick walls surround a long bar top perfectly aligned with stools as intergenerational discussions commence. Bartenders vibrantly dance, accessorized with drink shakers while they craft the next curated drink.
We've heard it a couple of times, and I feel like it's true. It's the queer cheers. We have our regulars now.
That's Angela Barnes, the co-owner of Nobody's Darling, a women-centered bar creating safe space for LGBTQ+ communities. Although they're a Black lesbian-owned bar, they're adamant about calling the bar women-centered and welcoming to everyone.
Still important to know that there are those spaces you can go to and find community and find family.
Women-focused spaces have decreased over time. According to the Lesbian Bar Project, during the 1980s, there were 200 lesbian bars in the United States, and now there are an estimated 21 lesbian bars that remain, post-pandemic. Of the lesbian bars left, there are only 2 that are Black-owned. Hers in Mobile, Alabama. The other is Nobody's Darling in Chicago. Different factors have attributed to the downfall of lesbian bars, including rent increase, online dating apps, LGBTQ+ discrimination, wages, credit, cis white men wages versus white women wages versus Black women wages, and LGBTQIA+ evolving language. But the main factor?
Of course, our gentrification, which have been really affecting our coastal cities.
That's Erica Rose, co-director of the Lesbian Bar Project. The Lesbian Bar Project is a documentary spotlighting the lens of the bar owners, community activists, and patrons, their struggles during the pandemic, their hopes for the future, and why they must work to save these sacred spaces. Before we go on, though, it's important to note their decision to make it the Lesbian Bar Project wasn't made lightly.
It's been, our main identifier for decades. That's not to say that the word lesbian has to be, we don't have to be so militant about how we define it. And there is fluidity, there is nuance in that label. It's such a disservice to our community if we think about it in exclusive terms rather than inclusive terms.
The term gay and lesbian became more commonly used after World War II, and the exclusive terms that she is talking about are the gayborhoods. Gayborhoods are exclusionary neighborhoods that consist of being predominantly cisgendered gay white men. Today, in Chicago's case, it would be Boys Town. These neighborhoods weren't always exclusive. They were actually gay villages, the original inclusive space.
The people who are, congregating in urban spaces think in themselves like this is the block where deviancy is happening. And I mean deviancy of all kinds, prostitution and homosexuality and cross-dressing, what was considered deviant sexuality at the turn of the century.
That's Dr. Eric Gonzaba, an LGBTQ plus historian and committee co-chair for LGBT history. Dr. Gonzaba is completing a book on the culture and politics of gay American nightlife since the 1970s.
Those neighborhoods existed, people knew, and there was plenty of slumming. People knew who were coming from the affluent neighborhoods of New York to the Lower East Side to see these pansies or these fairies and their awesome music and their jazz and their cross-dressing. It became kind of a spectacle.
After World War II, gay men were drafted and either go serve the federal government in Washington, D.C., or they serve in the South Pacific or in Europe.
You have a homosocial world. In other words, like it's becoming acceptable to hang out only with members of your own sex because you're basically the opposite sex is not unavailable because you're fighting a war, right? And so it's a huge opportunity for gay people who have these kind of same-sex attractions to be able to hang out, possibly have, intimate contact, perhaps even sex behind this idea that you can't go find an opposite sex lover because we're in war.
Gay people began leaving their smaller communities because they wanted to live near another queer person, creating gayborhoods, gay neighborhoods.
There's an idea here that the bigger the population, the quote-unquote more progressiveness that population is going to be, for whatever reason. The idea that more people means there's less eyes, direct eyes on one person, and you're allowed to be yourself. They start living next to each other because they read somewhere that, this is the street where other gay people are.
Cities like San Francisco became a gay village.
Businesses start catering to gay people start popping up in these villages, and they become kind of these, little biodomes, if you will, that sustain a community that has long feel like that they have not belonged in outside of this village.
Black queer women have struggled to be sustainable. Historically, Black and lesbians of color have been discriminated against in lesbian spaces, while white lesbians have been discriminated against in heteronormative spaces, and among cis white gay men. Starting as early as 1971 with the Bonnie and Clyde Bar in New York, they had an unspoken race-based quota, only letting in about 2 to 3 Black women. Audre Lorde wrote about it in her book, Zombie. ID policies that enforced race-based quotas were also policing lesbian and gay folks sharing space.
These ID policies were also applied to lesbian women to keep them away from gay bars, which is nefarious, by the way, because a lot of gay communities couldn't support lesbian bars, but they could support gay bars. So a lot of lesbians were like, I'll just go dance and hopefully meet women in the gay bars, but they weren't allowed in because they're women.
Yeah, I don't think there is an LGBTQ community, singular, right? And there never has been.
That's Tracy Bain, LGBTQ plus Chicago historian, along with being the president and co-publisher of the Chicago Reader newspaper.
The peak time that it had more of a form to it was around HIV/AIDS and the 80s, early 90s fights for gay rights ordinances, and sometimes around specific issues like after Matthew Shepard was murdered, around Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and around Defense of Marriage Act and marriage equality. There have been moments in time where those disparate aspects of our community come together.
During this time, lesbian bars found a greater need to celebrate community. Tracy brings some context to lesbian bars as centers for community formation.
They had a profound impact. They were like community centers. They were very important to the growth of the community. They were where you could pick up the gay newspaper, or pick up the gay gossip, or pick up a woman. They were there for you. But the vast majority of the community did not go to those places. They physically could not have. But their existence helped expand the movement, expand our rights, allowed for the formation of activism,
so that they were centers. They were very important centers, but they were not the only thing that people used to meet, socialize, etc. Proportionally, they were very small, but their impact was very large.
Gay and lesbian bars were regularly raided, and shortly after the Prohibition, places like New York, Los Angeles, and New Jersey began systematically targeting gay and lesbian bars through their alcoholic beverage control regulations between 1933 and 1967, holding liquor licenses, as it was considered illegal to serve alcohol to queer folks or for them to dance with the same sex. Because of systematic injustices rooted in targeting the LGBTQ+ community, such as the ABC regulations, safety for the queer community has always been a concern. According to a report by the Williams Institute at UCLA's School of Law, LGBTQ+ people are nearly 4 times more likely than non-LGBT people to experience violence, including rape, sexual assault, and aggravated assault. In 2017, the Anti-Violence Project, a national nonprofit that tracks violence against the LGBTQ+ community, reported there was a record high of 52 anti-LGBTQ+ homicides across the United States. More than 70% of those victims were people of color. Safe spaces for LGBT folks have been the LGBT Center. For Chicago, it's the Center on Halsted.
When you think about our movement, the LGBTQ+ movement, we have been ostracized, we have been put aside, we have lived through violence, we have lived through bigotry and hatred. And so these community centers, like Center on Halsted across this country, allow those walls to come down, create an opportunity to be respected, create an opportunity to have your voice heard, create an opportunity to create change. And that's what these safe spaces are about.
That's Modesto Tico Valle, the CEO of the Center on Halsted, Chicago's LGBTQ center. This is where Angela and Renauda first met. Centers like this are where many queer folks depend on for safe space and feelings of home and community.
Two of my favorite people, so.
Thank you, sir. A lot of people still don't get invited to the weddings. A lot of people still need the clubs. They need the social events. They need the community centers and the hotlines and all that stuff. And so we have to remember sometimes we still need our chosen family.
Including for Renauda, who always knew she had feelings for women, but never acted on it because of her upbringing in Huntsville, Alabama, as Jehovah's Witness. It wasn't until she got to Chicago and met other women at the Center on Halsted that gave her the support and confidence to come out.
Center on Halsted will always be in my life is because I met other queer people that looked like me, right? I had confidence, but I didn't have confidence to tell my mom that I was, queer, because that's a piece of who I am, right? And I wanted to share that with her. But I didn't have confidence until I came to the center. I met other women that looked just like me, that were amazing, thriving, women of color. And that was when I grew my wings and was able to truly be myself, my authentic self, and be whole.
After 10 plus years of friendship, golf, and great cocktails, the pandemic happened. The two became the second Black-owned women-centered bar in the United States. Angela and Renauda purchased the lesbian wine bar Joie Divine after they closed because of the pandemic, and turned it into what we now know as Nobody's Darling. Nobody's Darling has become a safe haven for LGBTQ+ communities, taking their mission to heart in its namesake, from the Alice Walker poem, Be Nobody's Darling. When searching for a name for the bar, Angela picked up her dog-eared, copy-filled book with underlining and highlights to reread her favorite poem, Be Nobody's Darling, by Alice Walker.
When you have two Black women, two queer Black women, right, doing something that isn't done every day, there is something about that says, you know what, we're just going to do this because we believe in it, and we're not going to worry about what other people have to say. And then I thought about the people who probably are going to come to the bar, right? And what they look like and what they've had to kind of go through in their lives.
It speaks to what we're doing. It speaks to our community being an outcast, and also just us being in the bar industry and being new to it and doing it on our own terms, and wearing it as a shawl, and and just being reverent in what we're doing. I think that poem sums up everything for us.
It is to the people that I got you.
Oh, yeah. Oh no, you're okay.
But that's also what I mean right there is
that's MC, a Nobody's Darling regular turned friend to the Nobody's Darling community, getting up to help the vendor bring in her food.
I don't know who that is, but I want to help them. You know what I mean? They're going into Nobody's Darling, and anyone that comes into this place is probably a high caliber person. Just wonderful quality, and calling it a safe place honestly just feels like a massive understatement. It really just feels like a home.
The feeling of home or space have been difficult to find within its complexities in an evolving rainbow family.
If I could sum up Nobody's Darling is you can come here once and know nobody. You will never come here twice and not know anybody.
While Renauda and Angela are committed to creating space, they're just as passionate about their space being more than just a bar for the community. They both are active on nonprofit boards. They prioritize being of service to historically marginalized communities. Nobody's Darling will be one soon. Their respect for the community is exemplified in the way the community returns the support. Oh, wow. That was such a dope experience to be there in Chicago and to have the full-on Nobody's Darling experience. I want to give a formal thank you to the folks of Chicago, especially the owners of Nobody's Darling, Renauda Riddle and Angela Barnes. They literally, they took me under their wing and they showed me around. They introduced me to everyone and anyone. It was, we even got like the VIP, we got the VIP treatment when we went to Boys Town, which I didn't know. You just say Renauda at the door. I mean, now that I'm putting it out there, I don't know if this is still going to happen, but you say Renauda's name at the door, and it was all of us black queers just migrating into Boys Town, into a club in Boys Town. So again, from the bottom of my heart, I'm sincerely appreciative, and I really had an incredible time. So thank you again to the owners. And I also want to give a quick thank you to everyone that I interviewed in relation to queer space, Lost Dyke Spaces, lesbian bars, all of it. There are so many folks that I've interviewed in this crusade of trying to figure this out in a deeper context. So I want to say thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your schedules. And, I'll have all of your names in the credits as well. Make sure that you check them out as well, because they are also doing incredible work. And I also want to say, especially to Tracy Bame and Karen Hawkins, they are the real Chicago. They are the Chicago plug. Let's just put it that way. They are the Chicago queer plug. And you can follow Nobody's Darling on Instagram at Nobody's Darling Bar. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I had a blast diving deep in it. Going to Chicago was a life-altering moment, and I will treasure it for a lifetime indeed. And I have to say that I got the Queer Cheers experience, and they looked out for me for sure. And so again, I want to say thank you. Y'all, we're all that we've got, and we've got to continue to support one another. And so with that, I'd like to give a massive thank you to my family, my friends, my supporters, and my dream team of advisors, aka my committee. Y'all the real MVPs. But I do want to give a shout out because they are incredible women that I've really honestly learned from throughout the entire time that I've been doing this grad school ting. So I really am appreciative and grateful to have such a dream team. So with that being said, I want to give a shout out to, you got to make sure that you give love to Willa Seidenberg, Dr. Alyssa Richardson, and Rebecca Haggerty. And of course, to my ace behind the scenes with the camera, my ace, my day one, Brooke Coleman, behind the scenes. And for more inspiring Black queer stories, follow us on Instagram at The Black Catalyst, and we'll see you on the next Black Catalyst show. Woo!